Welcome to the Social Work is Everywhere podcast. My name is Fulvio Cativo, and I'm the Associate Dean of External Affairs at the University of Maryland School of Social Work. It's my pleasure to join today Tisha Edwards, a 2000 MSW graduate of the School of Social Work and a 2001 graduate of Maryland Carey Law. Tisha now serves as the president of the Maryland Bankers Association, and she was also recently appointed to the University System of Maryland Board of Regents. Tisha, thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
So tell us a little bit about your role, yourself, and your journey to how you got to your current role at the Maryland Bankers Association.
Yeah, so it's really been a joy. I've been at the Maryland Bankers Association for a little bit over a year plus, and it's been a wonderful experience. But it has been a windy road to go from the School of Social Work to being the president and CEO of the Maryland Bankers Association. I'm originally from Meridian, Mississippi. That's where my family is. And I came to Baltimore specifically for the purposes of going to school. And what brought me here was the dual degree program, the opportunity to get a master's in social work and a law degree all at the same time. And I found that really appealing. That's before everybody was doing the dual degree thing. But Maryland, I had a really well-established program. And so that brought me here. I started my studies in community. And so my professional career has just been kind of the evolution of finding all kinds of places and opportunities to be in service of the community. So everything from a CEO of a school system to running, an organization in city government, to being on the cabinet for mayors, the governor. I mean, just a lot of different things, but it's brought me to a really, really wonderful organization with the Maryland Bankers Association.
So you shared your background growing up in the South. How did your values and your ambition and your interest in kind of shaping your professional path lead you in this incredible professional journey?
Well, I'm really proud of the fact that I'm a Southern girl. And what that means to me is my experience being a Southern girl is that we're very people-centric. So, when I moved to Baltimore, I always looked people in the eye and said, "Hey, how are you doing? Good morning." And people would walk past you and they'd be like, what are you? So I've always, I was raised in an environment, in a community, in a family where connecting to people, seeing people, giving them eye contact, making yourself approachable is a very Southern trait. And so I have brought that experience forward into everything that I do. The other thing I think about being a Southern woman, or as my mother would say, a Southern belle, is that we are very deferential and respectful. We still say yes ma'am, no ma'am, and we try to show a lot of respect to people, and it's a place where dignity matters, respect matters, and connection matters. And I'm not saying that's not the case in other places, but it is absolutely a part of Southern culture. The other thing which I brought to this, which I didn't, when you asked the question, it made me reflect on my time at the law school, where, of course, being a woman of color, we were in the minority there at the law school, and being a woman of Southern roots, it was very important to me for our classmates, particularly the students of color, to connect, have a sense of purpose. And so in law school, we used to have these bi-weekly dinners at our colleagues, our peers' homes. And that was very Southern, about fellowshipping and using food as a opportunity to develop relationships, not just be in the library, not just be in the classroom, but using, kind of that Southern style of hospitality as an entry into developing relationships with my peers in that program. And so there are all those little things about coming from the South that I think have informed my values early on in my career, but even now in terms of how I try to engage with individuals that I work with, individuals that I serve. I think it has a very Southern culture kind of touch that I bring to the work.
Someone in this building told me that this is inherently a people business.
Yes.
And I think that's something you seem to have kind of infused into all your work.
Yes, yes. That is a common through line for me. No matter what my experience has been, at the end of the day, we are all in service of each other. The best work happens when you connect with people. That's how you get the best out of folks. And so I think that the School of Social Work really prepared me for that, because the training is, even if you're doing systems work, even if you're doing organizational work, there is still this responsibility and this understanding and the attempt to engage people in whatever you do. And so that is a common kind of through line in my work, but also a part of my leadership principles in terms of how I show up.
How did you know that pursuing both a law degree and a social work degree was going to give you the tools and kind of professional training to do the type of work that you envisioned for yourself?
I didn't know. It was my mentor when I graduated from Georgia State with a bachelor's degree in social work. I went to her when I was kind of ending my practicum experience. She's a judge. And I said to her, thank you for allowing me to work here at juvenile court. I've really enjoyed the experience. I'm intending to pursue a master's degree in social work. And she said, no, we're going to do a little bit more than that. And I said, oh, what do you mean? And she said, you really should pursue going to law school. And I really didn't see myself in that way. I loved being trained as a social worker. I was very excited about the work that I've been doing in juvenile court with young people. And she said, you know, it's great that you feel like you found your place in that, but I think if you would consider going to law school, and even better, a school where you can get both degrees, you'll have the skill set that is very transferable in a lot of different places and spaces. You will come into the room social worker plus, and that will shift how people perceive you. It will shift the opportunities that you're being presented. And at that time, there were only 12 schools in the country that had a formal MSW-JD program. And she helped me map that out. She wrote my letters of recommendation, and it was really that mentor that sparked that idea and helped me understand the possibilities. And she was 100% right.
That's a pretty extraordinary story of the impact of mentorship. Is that something that you've since thought about in sort of helping shape other people, perhaps,
absolutely,
in your professional path?
I owe it forward 1,000 times over. If I had not had that conversation, I think my life would have been fine. But it totally changed how I saw myself, because going to law school was not on my trajectory. I didn't even think that was possible, quite honestly. I felt like having the bachelor's degree in social work and moving into the master's would be quite seamless, if you will, and natural. But going to law school was kind of a level up. And, you know, that conversation, that guidance, and I'm a first gen college student, so my family really didn't have the capacity to provide me that kind of guidance. And for her to be in that moment with me, to stop me and say, wait a minute, there's something else you could do that would really level you up, leverage your capacity, leverage and expand the possibilities for you. I never would have thought of it. And so it is a gift that she didn't just say thank you and it was great working with you and have a good life, that she thought enough to speak into me something I didn't see in myself. And so I have absolutely try to do that over and over and over again. I love mentoring young people, colleagues, friends, anybody who's willing to listen to me. I love that, and I also like going a step further. And sponsorship has also become something that I'm able to do because of the work that I've done over the years. I'm in a really great opportunity to go beyond mentoring an individual, but championing their success and championing them for opportunities even when they are not in the room. So I'm a big fan of mentorship. I try to live that because it has been so important at multiple points in my career. But I also believe not only do I have a responsibility to mentor, but I also need to be sponsoring at this point, and helping to open the door of opportunity for so many other people.
That's extraordinarily thoughtful. And I'm curious, again, just from your own lived experience, what insights or advice might you impart on, the folks currently going through this process? You talked a little bit about your first generation, college going experience. What message would you have for students kind of currently in that struggle?
So, my mother, when I was a little girl, used to say, "Show me your friends and I'll show you your future," right? And the way I think about that now is we all need to be surrounding ourselves with people who make us better, who hold us accountable to our dreams, right? So we often say, "I want to do this, I want to do that," but then we don't do it, or we become fearful about it, or we set our goals, we're not ambitious and audacious enough in our goals. And so, what I say to all of us, including myself, because I have to continue to challenge myself in this regard also, is, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And so we all need to be doing everything that we can to get people around us who help us be the best version of ourselves, personally and professionally. You never outgrow that, right? And so you want people around you that you respect. You want people around you that level you up. You want people around you that always see more in you than you see in yourselves. You want people around you who hold you accountable, right? Mentorship isn't just about saying how great you are. Actually, the best mentors are the people who tell you where you fall short, and they support you on your growth journey. And so I don't think that that's a life lesson just for students or that has any age. It is, we all should surround ourselves with people who help us on this journey of achieving our goals and being the best version of ourselves.
And perhaps, in one of our many past conversations, you've talked about recession proofing your career, and something that you've been very intentional in both building your professional path, but something that you've also been extraordinarily open with, again, younger generations about thinking about how to shape their careers so that they give themselves that both versatility, but some degree of, I guess, professional resilience. How would you describe that?
That's a really great question, even now, because things are changing so quickly for all of us in the workforce. And no matter what profession you're in, I think that these are very transformational and unprecedented times around the future of the workforce, and that is inclusive of all of us. And what I have had the pure privilege of is that after that one piece of guidance in my early days, it helped me understand, first of all, you can do anything, is what she was saying to me, right? Like, you don't have to pick a job or pick a profession or pick a lane, and you don't have to commit your life to it. You can move in different places and spaces. You can learn and apply, and that allows you to grow and be a really strong candidate in places that you might typically not think of, right? So when we say social workers, people have a vision of what that looks like. It looks like a person doing case management. It looks like a person a lot of times doing clinical work. It doesn't necessarily look like a superintendent of a school system or a president and CEO of a banking association or even a cabinet member for a city or state official. When you say social worker, that's not necessarily what comes to mind. I am really fortunate that because of that piece of advice I got in my early days, it has helped me understand that really at the end of the day, there's so much, whether it's social work, law, business, or whatever, it's how you approach your work, your relationships you have with people. It's being a lifelong learner, and it's really understanding how to have skills that are transferable in lots of different industries. And so I always push people who will say to me, and I've seen it a lot in teachers, I've seen it a lot with my colleagues in social work, where they say, well, I've just been a teacher for 20 years. No one's going to hire me in business, or I've just been a social worker and no one's going to see me as a businesswoman. And I actually think that that's completely not true. Really, it's first of all, how do you tell your own story? What do you tell yourself? And really thinking about what are you doing and how you can frame that in a way that goes across disciplines, across industries, and that you're positioning yourself to learn things that, learning about P&Ls and balance sheets, any business, and social workers have the capacity to know that, whether you don't have to be an MBA student to understand a balance sheet. Being a fundraiser sounds a little bit like business development to me. So if you're a social worker who has been raising money for really great causes and organizations, and you said, I want to go work in an organization where I can do partnerships and business development, those things are very transferable. And so part of it is like, how do we see ourselves and not limiting ourselves? How to be able to talk about what you do in lots of different places and spaces. And if you can make that case, and if you can demonstrate, it doesn't have to be a one-for-one. It just has to be something where you can show and make the connection. I've found that it can position you. You can be positioned to do almost anything. I cannot do brain surgery. That's what, there are certain things that are absolutely outside of my reach, for sure. But most things are within our reach, and it's really first and foremost how we see ourselves. And how we look at our work is not these transactional, tactical, isolated things that we do, and have a more global sense of our work and its impact, its value proposition, our accomplishments, being able to speak about those very clearly. And then finally, just being very adaptable and having a adaptable growth mindset about yourself. That's what makes you recession proof. But if you think that you went to school to do one thing and that's really the only thing that you can do, that's really limiting. And so I think that has helped me move around in the various roles that I've had the pleasure of being in. Being a social worker, which I'm very proud of. I don't get to say I'm a lawyer. I say I'm a social worker with a law degree. So being a social worker has helped me to think about my work from a people-centered, community-centered approach, even in the banking industry. It's just as important in education as it is in banking to understand how the work that we do can positively or negatively impact families, impact whether or not communities are thriving, whether or not individuals have economic opportunity. And so because of that very strong community-centric organizational training that I received here at the School of Social Work with MACO, that really has been a linchpin resource for me in my career. It's funny, I always say at the law school, I learned how to write. and the critical thinking. In the School of Social Work, I learned how the writing and the critical thinking impacts individuals and communities. And so they are integrated educational elements that have helped me in all of these different um, organizations and roles that I've been in, very complementary. And so I can't think of a better way to be prepared to lead any organization than some of the training that I received here at the University of Maryland School of Social Work.
Looking back, was there a specific, memory or moment where you thought, oh, this social work thing is really giving me a leg up in this work that, again, others might not have considered?
There are two things that come to mind that first start with my educational experience. There is at the School of Law, there was Professor Susan Levington. I took her education policy class. And here at the School of Social Work, it was Professor Dick Cook. Those two professors, coming from very different disciplines, I had one of those, oh, this is what that judge was trying to tell me, because I was experiencing them both at the same time, about this very natural integration of two disciplines trying to achieve some of the same exact goals. And so it was in my final semester here at the School of Social Work, my final, one of my final policy classes at the School of Law, that I really had an aha moment about how these two educational opportunities were going to serve me really well. And in practice, I can think of opportunities over and over and over and again where they come together. But, I think I'm having that right now with the Maryland Bankers Association. And when people say banking, they're like, what? Why would a social worker care? If you say you're a social worker, you're over there in the industry, you're with the bankers. And it's interesting because I was at a conference, and one of the things they said is, in every great community, you have strong schools, a good library, a great bank, and I would add a grocery store. But banks, they're not just these buildings that don't have a purpose in all of our well-being. They actually are central to our well-being. It's our banks that create the resources, where we have our resources for economic opportunity, and for us to all be able to provide for our families, and hopefully even to accomplish some of our goals. So it's your bank that you go to for your first home loan, or you want to start a business, or you're planning for your retirement, or you're trying to make sure that your kids and your partners have the resources that we need. All of our decisions flow through the banking industry. And that's a place where I wouldn't have thought being a social worker would be so important. But we're in this moment in the industry where we have to remind the larger policy community, legislators, elected officials, the importance of banks in healthy communities, people having access to financial services, people being banked, people understanding how to organize their resources to have the life that they want. And so this is a place where I get to use my legal regulatory brain, but it's also a place where I get to use my macro, how do you get an industry, or how do you advocate for an industry so that people see this industry and it's good, and it's how necessary it is for us to have thriving communities. And so again, I'm seeing that intersection between law and social work in a place that normally you would scratch your head and say, why did they hire a social worker? It makes all the sense in the world to me because I've had these other experiences along the way.
You kind of hit on my follow-up question, which is one thing that you wish more people understood about your role and your organization that perhaps might not be apparent again in, just sort of seeing it on paper.
Yes, it is. We have a lot of work to do in the banking industry to help people understand how necessary it is to have banks as institutional resources in communities. We have a lot of, and we are as an industry doing a lot of work that unfortunately we don't always do a good job of championing the work, but bankers are leaders in assisting families with their financial goals and ensuring their financial well-being and ensuring that they have the resources to thrive. And banks do so much great work. I really am working hard on making that translation so that people don't just think of banks as these financial institutions that have no civic and community impact. They have an extraordinary impact and are an amazing resource. And we need to get more communities engaged with the industry so that they are positioned for financial success. And so I wish that I'm trying to use my kind of social work skills to kind of bridge that gap, because it's an industry that I think is not always seen for its value in community. And what I've learned along the way in this job is that bankers are very public service oriented individuals. They do this because they understand what the industry does to support business development, economic opportunity, financial well-being. These are men and women who care very deeply about community. If you look at on many boards and foundations, there's usually a banker sitting on those boards and foundations, because not only do they care in their professional capacity in their day job, they bring those resources and commitment to supporting community in everything that they do outside of their professional responsibility. So I want, hopefully, as the president and CEO and as a social worker, to help bridge that gap, I think, that exists in the larger narrative about the importance of the industry, and that the industry, it is a business, but it is a business who is trying to position communities, businesses, individuals to thrive. And just trying to thread that together is something that I'm really excited about doing. It's a real challenge, but it's a real opportunity, and it's an opportunity that I think only a social worker can figure out.
What insights or perhaps suggestions might you offer to our students or anybody who's come through this school and thinking again about building careers based on purpose, while remaining very loyal to this public service kind of backbone that you've talked about, in a way that, again, isn't necessarily defined by title or organization, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of purpose in places where you might not ordinarily look.
Absolutely. I love that question because I think about that a lot. First of all, it's a lot easier to go to work when it's aligned with your purpose, right? We spend a lot of time working and doing what we need to do to provide for our families. So when you have the opportunity to align your professional life with your purpose, that is an opportunity you should always take. And I believe you should always try to lead with that. I don't care how much money somebody gives you for a job or what title they give you. Usually that wears off if it's not aligned with what you really want to be doing with your time. So you might as well start there. What is it that I'm interested in and why? And really challenge yourself to be more clear about that. As an example, I meet people all the time and they say, I just want to help people. Okay, tell me more, right? And so really doing the work of trying to figure out a level of specificity around what could that look like, but also understanding that you can help people in almost any job that you do, right? And so I, even in this role with banking, I think it's been hard for people to see that as public service. It is public service because I wake up every day in service of my community and trying to make sure that an industry that I believe is very important to having a thriving community is positioned for success so that people can have money to invest in their businesses, their dreams, their retirements, their homes, right? Public service doesn't have to look one dimensional or one kind of way. Public service in many ways is like how you show up for your job, right? I believe that that public service is available to all of us. It's just the values that we bring in the execution of that job that in many ways determines, are we acting in the service of others? Is the public a leading consideration in the work that you do? But I hate to admit this. I have been at work. I have been working a very long time. I am on the kind of, the last part of this, what I would call like professional journey. I'm thinking about retirement these days, and I have had the pleasure of thinking about where I work, how I work, based on who I'm working with. That's important to me. And what is the work that I'm going to be doing every day? And is that the best use of my talents? Is that the best use of my interest? Am I going to make a difference? And so I start there. Once I have reconciled those kinds of questions, I'm gonna be working with people that are like-minded. And not like-minded does not mean we agree with everything, but we come to this work with good intentions. There's an opportunity for impact. There's an opportunity to make the organization better, that it will be better when I leave it than when I came. Like all of those kinds of considerations. Then I go to what is the title and what is the compensation and all of those kinds of things. But if I can't get past that first set of purpose-oriented questions for myself, then it's usually a role that I'm not going to really entertain, because I know after the title and after the compensation, I'm going to circle back and either be happy or not happy if it's not on purpose for me.
You read my mind, because, and this is a sort of personal preference question, but it immediately jumped to mind as I heard you speak. You're such a malleable and versatile professional. I think one of the truisms many of us discover in these kind of winding career paths is that sometimes more important than identifying what you do like is also identifying what you don't like.
Absolutely.
What don't you like? And
Oh my gosh.
it's like, what does that look like in your career? Because I think that's an important question, especially for early career professionals who are kind of going through this elimination process of thinking like, what does the ideal job look like versus what is a job that I can tolerate, or even a job that I love?
So a good example of change over time, this is really, I don't even know if I should say, I have to make sure I say this the right way, but there was a point in my career where I judge the job by how many people I'm supervising, how large is the organization, what's the budget. I thought that those were the things, and they did. I was the CEO of a school system. I established an office in city government that focused on children and families. And when at that time, the structure of the organization, span of control, the opportunity to do big things. I mean, I had 80,000 children that I was responsible for, and uh, building a government entity inside of city government. Those are like big, wonderful opportunities. And at those points in my life, that is what I wanted to be doing. Today, if you said to me, we want to recruit you to, manage a multi-hundred person organization and you're going to have $1 billion budget, I would be like, no, thank you. That ship has sailed, as they would say. And so this goes back to another part of kind of a learning that I've had and that I try to impose upon people that I work with, which is we all change, we all grow, our needs, our interests. So allow your life, and especially your professional life, to grow with you. Don't get so stuck. I was talking to one of my colleagues a week or so ago, and I was asked, why did you take this job? And I said, if you look at my resume matches what my soul desired. And what I meant by that, my resume reflects what my interests were, what kind of responsibilities I wanted to have. And there's this kind of inflection point where it's like all these big, really, really very difficult and complex things. And what I'm doing now makes sense for who I am now. It makes sense for who I am personally, where I am in my life. It makes sense based on all of the other experiences that I have. But how I chose this job and how I chose jobs 10 years ago are very different. And so one of the things I'm always saying to folks is don't get caught up in I once was, or back in the day or I did this 5 years ago, so this has to be 10x of that. Not necessarily. I mean, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. Take stock of like, who are you? What is your purpose today? My purpose today is not the same purpose that I had in my 20s and my 30s and even my 40s. And I'm looking forward to what my purpose will be in the future. And so being very malleable and is so important, and being self-aware and self-reflective, and again, having people around you who can help you see your own evolution, I think is really important.
You remain deeply committed to the state and to the University of Maryland, Baltimore, and to the University of Maryland School of Social Work and, the School of Law. Why do you think it's important to give back to this institution? And tell us a little bit more about why you became a regent of the University System of Maryland.
Can I just tell you things you don't see coming? When I moved here, I moved from Atlanta because I just graduated from Georgia State. Who knew? Who knew that I would have the opportunity to be a regent? That was one for the books for me. As I said earlier, I'm a first-gen college student. My mother only has an 11th grade education. My grandmother, a 6th grade education. It is mind-blowing to me that I have the pleasure to serve as a regent, to not only support this institution, but to support higher education across the state of Maryland. And the reason it's so, one of the reasons it's so important to me is because getting my college degree was the best thing. It was the thing that moved me from poverty to being in a position where my sons would go to college debt free. And it just blows my mind when someone says Regent Edwards. There are not a lot of titles I care about, but that one, it gets me every single time because it really speaks to what is possible for all of us. Baltimore has been very good to me. As you said, I've had a great run, a great career. The people of Baltimore, the institutions of Baltimore have been so receptive to my leadership and have put me in positions to do things that as a little black girl from Meridian, Mississippi, that I would have never dreamed of. So I am so proud to have been appointed by the governor to be a regent. I thought, my mother and I talked to her often about things I'm doing here. We thought I was really doing something when I worked for Governor Moore. That was a big accomplishment when we won that election. That was something I was like, wow, how did this happen? How did I get on this team? How did I contribute to this? This is a history-making moment. But that was his dream. Regent is my dream. And I take that role very seriously. I'm learning so much. I love the fact that we have such a wonderful ecosystem of colleges and universities across the state. I live here in Baltimore. Coppin is in my backyard. So I'm spending a lot of time there. I'm getting to know university presidents across the state. And I get to be a cheerleader for, the University of Maryland, Baltimore campus, all wrapped in one. So it's just, it's mind-blowing to me, actually. And again, I go back to that judge who called the play for me, who helped me come to Baltimore to pursue my education here, and it has just been such a ride. And I think it's a wonderful time for me to be a regent. Higher ed is in the midst of a lot of disruption and transformation, very similar to the banking industry and many other industries right now. And I have a particular lived experience and a voice that I think is important as a regent. And I think about students every time I show up for one of those meetings or engagements. So this is one that kind of hits me really, really hard because it's just something that if I were writing my own story, this would be a chapter that I couldn't have imagined. And I am really honored and excited to be alum sitting on that board. So I'm just positioned to do some really great legacy work as a regent. And one of the things I've been talking about is really how to make sure that college stays affordable, how to make sure that we integrate financial literacy and have a high standard for financial well-being in the experience of students. Many students, like me, have to take out loans and, going to college was a huge financial risk, was a huge financial commitment, was a huge financial investment. And so many students, like me, have no clue. We just kind of go with the flow. I remember being in the financial aid here, this department here, and she said, "Oh, it's going to cost you about $135,000." And I went, "Well, wait, what?" And I didn't even know what that meant, right? And I think about, again, tying these things together, how it just all comes together, being now a part of the banking industry and being able to bring this issue, being an authority, being a community partner around financial services and trying to figure out how do we do better at supporting students, whether they are undergraduate or graduate students, to have a plan for how that they are going to really afford having the degrees that they are pursuing. How do they make the decisions post-graduation to position them to be able to leverage the investment that they've made into their education? It's amazing to me that this is kind of coming full circle and being a regent, leading the Bankers Association, being a first generation college student, being a graduate from the institutions here, how it all kind of comes together and makes sense, even when it didn't always feel like, well, what am I doing? I'm doing exactly what I should be doing, and I'm really excited about that.
To bring this around, this podcast is titled Social Work is Everywhere, which is a phrase that our dean, Dr. Judy Postmus, likes to use to describe that, the reality that social work, as she describes it, is everywhere people are.
That's right.
But we're very intentional about that phrase, of course, to showcase this profession and the many, many, many ways in which it touches, our existence. What does it mean to you? What does social work is everywhere mean to you, especially as someone who's worked in so many different sectors?
I mean, it's one of those degrees that has been transformational for me, and I think I'm a living example of the possibilities of this education, this training, this community. And social work is everywhere is exactly what the dean has said. It's if there are people, then there is a role for us to add value and to make the lives of others better. And I think the other part of it, the reason I'm loud and proud around being a social worker, is that I want to make sure that any person, male or female, from the South, Baltimore, up wherever, that people understand that this is a very inclusive profession. And it is a profession where there is extraordinary opportunity to have impact. And you can have whatever you need to fulfill you, and you can be in the community doing great work. And so it's a very kind of, I think, necessary and agile training and profession. And so I agree with the dean, and I love telling folks that I'm a social worker, because a lot of times they don't really. I love that response. And so I agree with that, and I think it's good for the profession. I also think it's good for our students to understand that there are so many possibilities, limitless possibilities, in terms of how they can contribute, how they can show up, and how they can do great work, because social work, not only is it everywhere, it is needed everywhere. And so I agree with the dean 100%, and I'm glad to be a representation of that.
Thank you very much, Tisha, Regent Edwards, for joining us on this episode of the Social Work is Everywhere podcast. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I'm just happy with everything that's happening here at the school. I'm really excited about the future that the dean has laid out for us. We're growing. I think that the school is stronger than it's ever been, and I'm a proud alum, and I'm here to serve. And it's just been a pleasure to have been here since 1998 now. So it's been a while that I've been in Baltimore, and the School of Social Work has been a part of that journey. And so I'm just grateful. I think that's how I'm feeling today, is just extraordinary gratitude for this institution.
Thanks for listening to the Social Work is Everywhere podcast. If you've been inspired by the stories and impact shared today, consider supporting the University of Maryland School of Social Work. Your donation helps fund scholarships, research, innovative teaching, and community partnerships that make a real difference. Every gift matters. Visit ssw.umaryland.edu/give to donate today. To request more information about admission to the University of Maryland School of Social Work, visit ssw.umaryland.edu/msw.